And so he modeled Yoda on Robert Monroe.
Yeah, Robert Monroe had a very craggy, very interesting face, and he sketched him extensively, during workshop sessions, and eventually Robert Monroe, his face appeared on Yoda. You take away the funny hair on that is Robert Monroe. If you look at a picture of him, in his latter years, you'll see it's Robert Monroe. And this is not a topic to ever bring up around Robert Monroe, apparently. He did not like it. He was very unhappy about it. Anyway, besides that, when I first saw him, the image that built up in the room, I'm clairvoyant, was of Yoda. And I looked at him, and knowing the story, I said, Robert Monroe, and a big tick appeared in midair, and he transformed into Robert Monroe. And I said, okay, Robert. I said, nice to meet you. I said, what do you think of the workshop so far? And he smiled at me and went, tick. He liked it, yeah. I had a lot of other contacts with him during the week of the workshop. His energy is very strong there in the Institute, at the Monroe Institute. And it was like, I quite like the man. And I think I told him at the end there, I said, you seem to have mellowed a bit since you died, Robert, and a big tick appeared, saying yes.
That's
wild. A lot.
Wow, interesting story. Okay, so let's try to get as close to present time as possible. When did you start to figure out that you had some faculties with this, and you wanted to begin to really explore this and create your own system, which goes by the way of new, by the way. And when did all this start to really take hold for you, Robert?
Well, the short version is when I got to about 20, I'd had thousands of OBEs and clairvoyant experiences. My mother got more interested in spiritualism, and I was exposed to a lot of books by this, and I was a real bookworm in those days. I read them, and I started to follow the books. I think the first book I ever followed, practical-wise, was was called The Third Eye by Lobsang Rampa.
Right.
And the techniques in there are actually pretty good. Cut a long story short, jump forward many, many years. When I was about 40 years of age, just before 39 years of age, I was doing an enormous amount of meditation, and I'd raised my Kundalini and done a lot of really incredible things. And one evening I was sitting by the fire in the house alone, and I was just playing with my energy. And I had an idea that if you had major chakras, energy centers in your body, you'd also have secondary ones, minor ones. And I theorized that you'd have them in the joints.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. And I was just feeling around. I theorized, okay, the big toes would be a good place to start. So I'm feeling around with my right big toe, and I'm just sort of looking at it and sort of trying to get an impression of it. And what I started doing, I started connecting with my tactile senses with my big toe, and I started moving it backwards and forwards, up and down, and moving my tactile sense through it, my point of body awareness through it, without knowing it. And in a few seconds, my toes started to buzz and vibrate and tingle. And I thought, whoa, what's happening here? So I played around with some more, and before I know it, all my other toes were buzzing, and then on both feet. And, keep going for like an hour. I started moving it through my legs, and I had my whole body and joints and all my chakras buzzing. And I discovered a new way of stimulating the energy body, which is using your tactile senses. Now, cut a long story very, very short, I realized later what I discovered here is a missing link. And this is when a couple of hundred years ago, a lot of Eastern knowledge was brought to the West, including knowledge on energy work and, spiritual metaphysical techniques. The only word we have in the English language, translating often from Sanskrit, was to describe how to move energy were words relating to visualization. And so everything became visualization, and visualize this, see this, and see that. Mm-hmm. Now, what I discovered, the missing link between the missing link that actually makes energy work, which allows you to stimulate your energy body to move energy through your energy body, are your tactile senses, a sense of touch, kinesthetic awareness. And mm-hmm. once I discovered that, in a few short months, I worked through my energy body, a quarter inch at a time, and discovered all the little pathways and every little secondary chakra and all the little connecting bits and doobobs and chakras and how it all worked. And I mapped it all out by working. I'd read very, very little on this at the time. There's very little practical stuff around about this, particularly at that time. Mm-hmm. And so in a very, very short time, I mapped it out, and I started, developing my own system. This is my work, what I'm doing. And so I started sharing on the internet, and eventually I published some articles on the internet. This is about 1994, 1995, mm-hmm. On energy work and astral projection.
And then in 1999, your first book, Astral Dynamics, came out, and it's been very successful. It's sold over 50,000 copies, and I'm sure it's still in demand, and really, puts you squarely on the map in terms of this field and this area of awareness. I was reading your latest book, and the book that what I have here, which was sent to me by your authors, which is Energy Work: The Secrets of Healing and Spiritual Growth, which actually came out in 2007. You've got some other books in 2011, The Practical Psychic Self-Defense Handbook and Evolution, What You Need to Know About to Be Successful Spiritualities. But this is the book that I've been focusing on. And there's a story in there where you work with a young man, I guess this was about, 20 years ago, who was having a hard time seeing. And you were able to work with him, and he's actually able to regain his sight, go to the 20/20 level. It's a fascinating story. Can you recount that for the people that are listening to the show?
Oh, that's Jose.
Uh-huh.
It's spelled with a J, but it's pronounced Jose. Jose. It's Spanish. Yeah, mm-hmm. That was one of my first healing clients. Around that time, I also opened up a couple of healing centers, and I worked long and hard at healing. It was my first love. Jose was a young guy, he was about 12 years old, and we had a healing center, my mother and I, in our home. And he turned up one day with his mother, and he had big, thick, shot, glasses about half an inch thick. And he was always, peering through them. He could hardly see. And he had a congenital eye defect. And he was, going steadily blind, and they said by the time he was like 15, he'd be completely blind. And I worked with him, and his mother was nice. She didn't speak much English, but Jose spoke good English. He came probably about 4 or 5 times once a week, and I would talk to him, and he said to me a couple of times, he says, I know my eyesight's going to come back. He says, I can feel it. He said, every time I come here, it gets a little bit better. And then after about 5 visits, of course, I encouraged him. And I'm doing my best. The healing flowed really wonderfully. And then I got a phone call from his mother saying, oh, please, you've got to help. I said, what's the matter? She says, Jose has thrown away his glasses and won't tell us where they are. He said he doesn't need them anymore, but poor Jose needs his glasses. And they came the next day, and Jose didn't have his glasses on. He says, I can't see with my glasses on anymore. He said, it's all blurry. I can see really well without them, but Mum won't believe me. And she took him to the eye specialist that day, and they came back for the second healing center we had later that week. and with the report from the eye doctor, and Jose was diagnosed with 20/20 vision. The doctors could not understand. They think there must have been a mistake made somewhere because he suddenly had perfect vision and was not congenitally going blind anymore. And I often think about him. I saw him about 10 years later, maybe more, 15 years later, and he was married, had a family of his own, and I looked at him, and he touched his eyes and went thumbs up, still had perfect vision. And he works as an electrician, electronics technician.
Where you have to use your eyes in very specific and focused fashion on a daily basis, right?
Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah. I mean, you think about going blind yourself, it's a big chunk out of your life. I mean,
absolutely. I wanted to talk to you briefly because we've only got about 10 minutes left before I have to transition to the second phase of the show. But I wanted to talk to you briefly about psychic self-defense and your encounters with what we would call dark energies out in the world. Okay, and I wanted to ask you sort of the validity of these dark energies, and maybe you could share a personal experience or two. And how do we deal with them? I mean, certainly we have dark energy that we encounter on a personal level with other people, but then there's sort of this ambient, out-of-body disassociative dark energy, which is also, in our spaces as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe share an experience and maybe give people one or two kind of practical pieces on how they can deal with that?
Okay, well, negative forces exist. I was working as a healer very, very active for many, many years, and I'd often come across people that had, they told me they had, dark energies, possessing entities, and various things making their life terrible. And even though I was supportive and, I took them at face value, I never really got it because I'd always been, I think, very, very protected from these things. And then one day, I'm giving healing to a 5-year-old boy who had a horrific problem, a demonic possession problem. It seemed like a lot of phenomena around him. And I'd given him healing many, many times. And one night, an exasperation, it just popped into my head, a line out of the movie The Exorcist when the priest says, "Take me and leave the child." And I said it in my head. And I said it sincerely, "Take me and leave the child," a little 5-year-old boy.
Right.
And it did, instantly. And I was paralyzed, I could say, tortured for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then I collapsed. And I got up after that, and I felt okay. But over the coming weeks, I started losing control of my body one hand at a time, a little bit. It's almost like something was trying to drive me. And this got worse and worse to the point where I moved into a house on my own. I didn't trust myself to drive. And this was over a period of several weeks. And what was happening, I was becoming demonically possessed. And this thing was really evil. It was the same being that was with the child, which was a demon. I saw it very clearly. It looked very much like Gollum out of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But with little horns about an inch long in its head.